Good morning. So yesterday we read the Wednesday Wars October Part 3 and finished up that chapter. We learned that Holling had to clean the rat's cage, Caliban and Sycorax, and in doing so got distracted and they escaped. He also begins his Shakespeare lessons with Mrs. Baker and finds out that he doesn't hate them. So he thinks he's kind of foiled her plan, her plot to make him really hate Wednesdays. So we're on to November part 1. November dripped onto Long Island as it did every year. The days turned gray and damp, and a hovering mist licked everything. The perfect white cement sidewalk in front of the perfect house was always wet. The azaleas lost the remnants of their white and pink blossoms, and then many of their leaves, since they were half naked and embarrassed. My father wrapped them in tight burlap, which also got wet. On the first Saturday, I cut the lawn for the last time, and then my father cut the lawn again to get it right, since it was going to look this way until spring, he said, and it had better look good. The next Saturday, we climbed up to the roof and cleaned out the gutters, since they were overflowing now every time it rained, and the dirty water was staining the corners of the perfect house, which made my father really mad. But not as mad as the stain on the ceiling of the perfect living room made him. No one knew how long water had been dripping down onto it, because nobody ever went in there. So by the time my mother discovered it while vacuuming, the stain was as wide as a garbage can lid and dark with mold. That night, when my father reached up to feel it, a handful of plaster came down on his face. Some of the moldy stuff got into his mouth. It was a very quiet supper. But that's November. It's the kind of month where you're grateful for every single glimpse of the sun or any sign of blue sky above the clouds, because you're not sure that they're there anymore. And if you can't have sun or blue sky, then you wish it would snow and cover all the gray world with sparkling white so bright that your eye can't take it in. But it doesn't snow on Long Island in November. It rains and rains and rains. Which is how, I think, Mrs. Baker got the idea of assigning me the Tempest. But her nefarious plot to bore me to death failed again, because the Tempest was even better than the Merchant of Venice. In fact, it almost beat out Treasure Island, which is saying something. It was surprising how much good stuff was in there. A storm, attempted murders, witches, wizards, invisible spirits, revolutions, characters drinking until they're dead drunk, an angry monster named Caliban. Can you believe it? I was amazed that Mrs. Baker was letting me read this. It's got to be censored all over the place. I figured that she hadn't read it herself. Otherwise, she would have never let me at it. Caliban, the monster in the play, not the escaped rat, he knew cuss words. I mean, he really knew cuss words. What Mr. Vendelari said while standing on Danny Hupfer's desk didn't come close. Even Doug Switek's brother couldn't cuss like that, and he could cuss the yellow off a school bus. I decided to learn them all by heart, even if I didn't know exactly what they meant. I didn't know what most of Doug Switek's brother's cusses meant either, and it didn't make all that much difference. It's all in the delivery anyway. So I practiced in my bedroom, thinking of my sister. A southwest blow on you and blister you all over. I know, it doesn't sound like much, but if you say it slow and menacing, especially when you get to blister, it'll do it. Keep your eyes half closed and it will really do. But for the rest of the Caliban curses, it's a lot better to say them loud and fast, like, the red plague rid you, and toads, beetles, bats, light on you, and as wicked dew as e'er my mother brushed with the raven's feather from unwholesome fen drop on you. I'm not exactly sure what that last one means, but if you really hit the last 3 words hard, it will do its stuff. I told you that Mrs. Baker wouldn't have let me read this if she'd read it herself. Every night after supper, I practiced in front of the dresser mirror, without my shirt, because I could look a lot more menacing that way. I decided to perfect the toads, beetles, bats one first, since that was the one I understood the best, and because when I said it, a little bit of spit came out with the word beetles. By the second Tuesday night, I had gotten it about down and could say toads with a blood-curdling croak when my mother knocked on my bedroom door. "Holling," she said, "are you all right?" "I'm fine," I called. "It sounds like you're talking to someone." "I'm practicing for a speech," I said, which was sort of true. "Oh," she said, "then I'll leave you to finish." I worked on the red plague for a bit because that one is all in the timing. Then my father knocked on the door. There must have been a commercial on. "I can hear you all the way down in the den. What are you doing?" "Practicing Shakespeare," I said. "What do you need Shakespeare for?" "For Mrs. Baker." "For Mrs. Baker?" "Yes." "Then get it right," he said, and walked away. I went back to the toads, beetles, bats until my sister knocked on the door. "Holling?" "Yeah." "Shut up." "A southwest blow on you and blister you all over," I said. She threw open my door. "What did you say to me?" In the face of a 16-year-old sister who's about to drop something on you from heaven, even Shakespeare fails. "Nothing," I said. "Keep it that way," she said. "And put your shirt on, you weirdo." She slammed the door shut. I decided I was done with practicing for the night. I went to school early the next day since I needed some private place to practice the curses. When I reached the 3rd floor, I found Mr. Vendeleri holding a ladder steady in the middle of the hall. He had half a dozen spring traps in his hand, which he was holding up toward Mr. Goreshi. I could see only Mr. Goreshi's legs, since the rest of him was poked up through an opening where he'd removed some asbestos tiles. "Hand me the rest," Mr. Goreshi called down, and Mr. Vendeleri did. "Now the cheese." Mr. Vendeleri reached into his bib overalls and pulled out a plastic bag with cubes of yellow cheese. "Now I'll just pull the spring back," said Mr. Goreshi, "and set the bait right beneath." There was a sudden loud snap, and it wasn't mercy dropping down as the gentle rain on the place beneath. It was Mr. Goreshi. "Oh," he said. Not really "oh," but it wasn't as good as Shakespeare, not even as good as Mrs. Baker. Mr. Goreshi looked up from the floor. His face was red and his fingers redder. He shook them wildly as if he wanted them to separate from the rest of him. "Oh," he said again. Not really. "You could try 'The Red Plague Rid You,'" I said. Mr. Goreshi, still on the ground, looked up at me. "What are you doing in school so early?" he said. "Or 'Scurvy Patch,'" I said. Mr. Goreshi shook his fingers again. "You're not supposed to be here this early," he said. "He saw us putting up the cages," said Mr. Vendeleri. Mr. Goreshi stared at him. "This is the student who let the rats go," he said. "He already knows." Mr. Vendeleri looked hard at me. Then he put his finger up to his lips. "Not a word," he said. "Toads, beetles, bats, light on me if I ever let it out," I said. And I got the timing just right, even the little bit of spit on the beetles. Mr. Goreshi looked at me strangely, and then he slowly stood, picked up the spring traps that had fallen around him, and turned to climb back up the ladder. Considering the condition of his red fingers, I thought it was pretty brave of him. "Go to class, Hollinghood," he said. Mrs. Baker was already in her classroom. She was looking up at the ceiling when I came in, listening to the scrambling and pattering of feet scurrying across the asbestos tiles overhead. We listened together for a moment until the scurrying stopped. "Not a word, Mr. Hoodhood," she said. "Not a word," I said, and went to my desk. "Did you finish The Tempest?" asked Mrs. Baker. "Yes," I said. "We'll see this afternoon," she said, and she turned back to a pile of essays on her desk, spreading a red plague over them with her pen. Even though I didn't have the private place to practice that I wanted, I figured I could work on the Caliban curses to see if I could get them down just right in a pressure situation. So I whispered into my desk, "Strange stuff that dropsy down you," which was cheating a little because I put two together, but I thought it sounded right. I tried it again, thinking about Caliban and Sycorax, the rats, not the monsters in the play, because I wanted to make the strange stuff come out more like a hiss. Is there something you have to say? Asked Mrs. Baker. I sat up. No, I said. Are you speaking to someone hiding in your desk? I shook my head. She put her red pen down. Since there are only 2 of us in the room, a situation which has become very familiar to us these past months, and since you were speaking, I assumed that you must be addressing me. What did you say? Nothing. Mr. Hood, what did you say? Strange stuff the dropsy down you? Mrs. Baker considered me for a moment. Was that what you said? Yes. A curious line to recite, especially since the combination never occurs in the play. Are you trying to improve on Shakespeare? I like the rhythm of it, I said. The rhythm of it. Yes. Mrs. Baker considered this for a moment. Then she nodded. So do I, she said, and turned back to spreading the red plague. That had been close. But I watched her with something like amazement. She had known the curses, both of them, and she had read the play, and she'd still let me read it. Whatever she was plotting, it was a whole lot more devious than I had given her credit for. I decided to ease into things more naturally, to let the Caliban curses come where they might fit in without any fuss. At lunch, I found that my mother had given me a bologna sandwich with no mayonnaise, a stalk of celery that had been wilting since the weekend, and a cookie with something growing on it that wasn't supposed to be there. Strange stuff, I whispered. At lunch recess, Doug Switek's brother lurched across the field, 6th graders scurrying out of his way as if he was a southwest wind about to blister them all over. Thou jesting monkey, thou, I said, not so that he could hear it. Right after recess, I found that the 8th graders had filled the boys' restroom with smoke so thick you couldn't even smell the disinfectant. Apes with foreheads, villainous low, I said. Not so they could hear it either. In geography, Mr. Petrelli announced a unit project, the Mississippi River and You. I raised my hand and told Mr. Petrelli that I had never been to the Mississippi River and had no plans to go soon. I didn't feel any kind of personal stake in it at all, so I didn't understand the you part. Must all history center around your own personal experience, Hood? Mr. Petrelli asked. It did seem that since we were talking about the Mississippi River and you, or in this case, me, one possible answer to this question would be yes. But in Camillo Junior High, and especially in Mr. Petrelli's class, the right answer is usually just shutting up. Your report, Mr. Petrelli continued on to the class, can be on, I whispered the toads, beetles, bats one here, and got it just right. In chorus, Miss Violet of the very spiky heels line isn't in Shakespeare. It's from Danny Hupfer. Miss Violet of the very spiky heels figured that we had way too many altos, and she told me to move forward to sing the melody with the sopranos. Me? I said. You have a lovely clear voice, Howling. I can't sing soprano. Of course you can, said Miss Violet. Just reach for the high notes. I gave my tenor music, to Danny Hupfer. You have a lovely, clear voice, Howling, he said. Pied ninny, I said. Meryl Lee made room for me on her music stand. You didn't know you could sing like a girl, did you? She said. Blind mole, a wicked dew from unwholesome fen drop on you, I said. I was getting good at making combinations. Meryl Lee grabbed my arm. What did you say? Miss Violet of the very spiky heels tapped her baton for silence. Then she raised her hands and waved them grandly, and we began a medley of American folk songs, which are supposed to make your heart swell patriotically. I tried to look like I cared a whole lot about reaching for the high notes, of which there were more than enough. Meryl Lee still held my arm. What did you say? She asked again. I'm just a poor wayfaring stranger. That's not what you said, she said. A traveling through this world of woe. Merrily moved her hand up towards my throat. Then Miss Violet of the very spiky heels tapped her baton again. Everyone was quiet. Merrily, Miss Violet said. Merrily dropped her hand and looked at Miss Violet. Her cheeks flushed into a color you only see on television cartoons. Merrily, said Miss Violet, I didn't send Holling up there so you could flirt with him. Well, the look that came over Merrilee's face was the look you'd have if you wanted the earth to open up so that you could jump in and no one would see you again forever and ever. Her mouth opened and her eyes opened and her nostrils opened. Even the freckles across her nose got a whole lot bigger. Miss Violet tapped the baton again and we started to sing. Yes, we're all dodging, 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 dodging. Yes, we're all dodging away through the world. I tried not to show anything when Merrilee put her foot on top of mine and pushed down as hard as she could, which, let me tell you, teaches you something about a world of woe and dodging too. The next hour was gym, where we ran laps around the track along with the 8th grade class, who all smelled smoky, especially Doug Switek's brother. Hood, hood, called Coach Quattrini. You call that running? The quality of mercy doesn't drop much from gym teachers. The reason I wasn't running well was because Merrilee had kept pushing down on my foot for all of going down the road feeling bad and almost all of worried man blues. And if it's possible for there to be internal bleeding in a foot, then that's what mine was doing. Pied ninny, I said, not loud enough for Coach Quattrini to hear me, but loud enough for Doug Switek's brother, who was running just behind me, to hear. What does that mean? He said, coming up beside me. What? He slowed down to match my limp. Pied ninny. What does that mean? Come on, said Doug Switek's brother. It means, you don't know? It means someone who's so stupid that he's eaten all these pies and gotten really sick. Sick like he's going to throw up all over himself. That sick. It was the best I could do while limping along with internal bleeding. That's it, he said. That's it, I said. Thanks, he said, and ran ahead, the scent of cigarette smoke lingering in the air.